Hi everyone, welcome to our first webinar for our new series, the Power Up series. We'll give it just a little longer to let people join before we kick off. But in the meantime, I just thought I'd let you know that if you're interested in learning more around the industry, then please make sure to keep your eyes peeled as we'll be hosting a new webinar on a trending topic each month as part of this new series.
So today our topic of focus will be, is the social entertainment era reshaping influencer marketing? And before we dive right in, we'll just take a few moments to introduce ourselves. I'm Edward, a senior creative strategist at MG Empower.
And I'm Steff, I'm senior account manager here at MG Empower.
Throughout the session, please remember to use the chat function to send us your questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts and perspectives throughout the session.
Yeah, please do send any questions and feedback. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. And Ed and I were talking around what we were going to cover today in this webinar, and we're really excited about today's topic because we get to work quite closely together on some of the strategies here at MG Empower. And when we're working on these strategies together, we're always thinking about how we can create entertainment through the content that we're briefing out to influencers, and also how can we keep the audiences engaged for as long as possible to create opportunities for conversion as well. And these are all things that we're going to chat through in more detail in this session. So I think to kick off, when we were kind of thinking around today's topic, we wanted to kind of look back and see how far we've come over the years and really reflect on the changes that have happened across, social platforms, but also looking at different additions to content formats as well. I've been working in influence marketing for around 7 years now, and in that time, I've seen such a huge shift in how platforms are used and what kind of good looks like when it comes to influencer marketing. And back when I started out in the industry, I think it was really around who you followed and who followed you. And when it came to the data, it was really around vanity metrics. So how many followers did you have and how could you get more? And reached impressions were very much the metrics everyone was looking to. So how many eyeballs could you get on a piece of content and how many likes and comments would that rack up as well? And these were really the metrics everyone cared about. And I think these metrics are still very much important today, and they measure, what they measure doesn't necessarily translate the real impact of influencer marketing. They offer the tip of the iceberg and don't always showcase the real impact on return on investment. And I guess with this in mind, Ed, when you cast your mind back 6 or 7 years, what would you say the focus was for content strategies?
I'd say for me, I look at it as two perspectives. One, from the everyday user, which is kind of myself and how I use social media, and then, as you said, from sort of that creative strategy perspective. So I'd say like my just early experience of, the kind of focus in social media, like Facebook and Instagram, I'd say the content, I engaged with felt like there was more of a heavy focus on the aesthetics, how the images were put together and how it looked and how you viewed people's profiles. And then alongside that, just capturing those social moments, from, friends or family. And a lot of it was based around getting likes, getting comments and, tagging locations and seeing what people are up to. Whereas when you look at it from sort of a strategic lens, I would say there was a heavy focus on conversion and brands trying to sell their products. Whereas I feel like in the tone of the way they sold it in terms of it lacked narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So it lacked narrative, which, didn't necessarily resonate with the everyday user. And there wasn't that sort of storytelling element that we see today, So that's kind of what I would say on that.
Yeah, I think you touched on it really. I think platforms back then were very much around connecting with family and friends, and we followed influencers, but they probably felt more like like-minded individuals back then. I think this has shifted, and I'm sure you've got the same, and I kind of see it in my feeds, but our feeds are flooded with content from influencers, brands, and people that we don't even follow. And I hear it all the time, and you've probably all seen the posts that's been shared around Instagram this week around the fact that people want the old algorithm to come back, and they just want to be seeing content from those that they follow. Yeah. And I think like Kim Kardashian's now shared it, Kylie Jenner, I think there's over 100,000 people signing a petition to change it back. But it all comes down to the fact that there's been a shift in the purpose of social channels. Today it's all around what you want to see and what keeps you engaged, and platforms have had to evolve and algorithms have had to be inputted to kind of identify that content that you're likely to find entertaining, which is therefore serving to you. So actually, we're not just being chucked random content for no reason. We're being served content that's going to keep us on the platform for longer. And Instagram have also responded to this to say that actually you can X out of the recommendations, or you can actually snooze them for a month, but actually they're doing it to help us out, and they're doing it to help creators reach new audiences and keep us entertained. And, at the end of the day, they want us to stay on the platform for as long as possible. So they're looking for ways to keep us there. And, I like to cook, for example. I cook from scratch every single night. And I'm often being served content. It's, recipe reels that I find myself completely engrossed in. And actually, often I haven't realized that it's being served to me from someone I don't actually follow until I've actually already saved that video so that I can go and try that recipe out another time. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is it actually does work. And I'm definitely spending more time on platforms than I was before. But I think it's really that kind of human reaction of they don't like change, but actually when we get familiar, what will actually that look like?
Yeah, I also think that there needs to be a balance as well. Because I would say, like you as well with that algorithm, I may, interact with a content that's about fitness. And then, all of a sudden I'll see like tons of, fitness content that's just kind of spamming my algorithm. Whereas I may interact with, a furniture, interior content, and I don't necessarily want to see interior, spamming my content, my feed. So I think it's just about finding that balance in the algorithm. But it speaks to, the fact that it's all about the type of content that, captures our attention. The fact that, the content we're talking about in terms of video is what everyone wants to see, and it's what is leading the way. And there's a great article from Later Blog that speaks to, the success of, that transition into that video-centric mode that you see the likes of Instagram moving to. Yeah. And then, we've had TikTok, be the leaders in that way. And for video content itself, it gets great exposure and more engagement than, traditional content. And then video itself tends to be, have a longer life shelf, it gets shared around more, it gets repurposed on, different platforms. I could watch a video on TikTok that I've seen on Instagram. So it's just about the way it sort of gets repurposed throughout different platforms, and it's a great selling tool. And as I said, it's growing in popularity. Like you see the way Instagram is moving to being sort of real centric as well. And I feel like just speaking about how video is entertaining, it kind of takes us into sort of the next subject where we ask the question, why is entertainment working? And for that reason. And I feel like, entertainment is working well on platforms, and obviously brands and users and creators are also feeling this benefit as well and experiencing similar results and success. But kind of what's behind this, what's behind the shift in entertainment? And the answer, could simply be the fact that we're continuously looking for digital experiences. We want to immerse ourselves in these social platforms because we desire constantly to be entertained, whether we kind of know it or not. And I feel like the social platforms are delivering this in high quantities. For example, Steff, if you look back, during the pandemic, when it initially started, how did you keep yourself entertained?
Well, I think like in the pandemic, you think back to, House Party was one of the apps that suddenly appeared that we'd never had before. What was the other one called?
Clubhouse as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So like these were born out of the fact that people needed to be entertained when they were stuck at home. And yes, they may not be around now, but I think they really served a purpose at the time. And I think that's had a knock-on effect on how other apps are now working to keep us constantly engrossed in content as well.
Yeah, I feel like you said, Clubhouse and House Party, they were like short-term fixes. Like we could say we're like, entertainment junkies, like we need that quick fix. And, when that died out, we're still searching for, entertainment for those moments where we can, immerse ourselves into these apps. And I feel like you've got some cool key points that, kind of speak to that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you can see in these stats here that from Provoke Media that 73% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the US are seeing social media as a source of entertainment. And in the UK, it's at 61%, and this is just going to increase over time. And I think when you ask why is entertainment successful, it's because when you think about it, where are people actually consuming this content? It's used as a bit of an escapism for whatever they're up to. So people are looking to be constantly entertained, whether they're kind of sat at home, are they actually boiling the kettle and waiting to make a cup of tea? Are they on their lunch break at work? If a piece of content doesn't grab a viewer's attention in a couple of seconds, seconds, and they're already on to the next. And I think a shocking stat in 2022 is that the average attention span is actually only at 5 seconds. So if someone's, not, entertained within 5 seconds, then they're not interested at all. And I think I'm definitely a culprit for this, but I do dual screen. So, I might be watching TV, but I'm also on my phone scrolling. And I think we were talking about this, this week. What are we actually looking at when we're dual screening? Like, most of the time, we're not even that engaged. And I think thinking around watching live TV, when we're watching live TV, which isn't actually as much as it used to be, there's that 3-minute ad break, and most of the time people will be consuming content within that ad break. So thinking around short form content, I think that's hugely successful because people can digest so much small, short term content within a small amount of time, which is really kind of bringing great results for brands, I think. And I think brands and influencers need to be thinking about this in their strategies moving forward. It's like, how do you authentically place a product or a service within a piece of content without it being overly obvious, while also staying culturally relevant and looking to convert? And I think something that I've noticed on TikTok over the last couple of months is a really interesting tactic, which is looking at episodic content. And when I'm speaking about episodic content, I'm not talking about long form content, which is probably where we're used to like hearing that term, but actually influencers taking a 90-second piece of content and splitting that into 3 sections. So that could be over 3 days or could be over 3 hours, but that kind of tactic is creating intrigue and engagement, and it's getting people to come back for more. And I think brands and influencers must not only keep up with what's relevant from a cultural standpoint, but also how their community wants to engage in that content and consume it as well.
Yeah, I think like that last point you made about the tactics that are happening on TikTok, kind of ties in well with sort of the section we're going to move on to, which is speaking to how are these social platforms adopting a video-centered approach, and yes, the sort of episodic content that TikTok is doing is definitely one of their approaches that is working for them and that influencers are taking advantage of. But then we also haven't mentioned, YouTube, who of course, are already sort of the pioneers in providing creators a platform to entertain, to freely be themselves, and to connect with their audiences. Although, those kind of vanity metrics, as you spoke about before, they've always been there in terms of how many views, how many subscribers. Like I remember, like getting to 1 million views was an amazing thing. Whereas, people achieve that all the time now. So I feel like YouTube has responded to the fact that people want to be entertained with their own sort of video-centered approach, which is YouTube Shorts. And it isn't necessarily, them strategically saying, hey, we're moving away from the long-form content. It's them being aware that, audiences need to be entertained. The fact that creators, need the platform to create this content in that short form, as well as, there's competition. There's TikTok who are by far leading the way, and I think this is just sort of a response to sort of how the landscape is shifting, and that sort of plays a part in how audiences interact on YouTube as well. Because YouTube Shorts for me I didn't know when it came out. I think it was 2020, but I remember just scrolling through the app and I was like, what's this? It felt very TikTok-like, but then you understand the sort of necessity of it when you start to use it and consume the content continuously. So I feel like their video-centered approach has worked for them. They receive about 1.5 billion monthly users on YouTube Shorts. So that's almost like TikTok numbers. And then you look at Instagram, and Instagram Reels, generates 67% more engagement than their original video formats. Hence why it makes sense that they're sort of consolidating to go into everything on Instagram Reels. So it is quite an interesting sort of shift that these platforms are doing. And I know you've got some sort of more information on TikTok as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like when we pinpoint the moment that we saw this massive shift, it's definitely around the kind of boom of TikTok and their video first approach. And I think when you look at TikTok, outfit inspiration, makeup tutorials, business tips, travel advice, lip syncing, comedy, there's not much TikTok doesn't do. And I think it's highly engaging due to that short form format that everyone's now copying. And I think with the limitations of the limitations of time, influencers and creators are forced to get creative with it, which is leading to that more entertaining content. And I think TikTok almost led to a new breed of influencers. You know, there was a shift in content that was less aesthetic. So I think you talked about it right at the beginning. Instagram was very much an aesthetic platform. You know, the still images lent themselves to that. And actually, TikTok is very much off the cuff. It's like that, you know, one-hit wonder. People are actually shooting it in their bedrooms, in their bathrooms, in their living room. They're not bothered about the fact it might be messy in the background. They're just creating content that's very much authentic to them. And that, you know, influencers that have been successful on both channels or multiple channels have had to adapt to what works on each channel. And actually, the influencers that have a very set aesthetic and aren't open to making those changes are perhaps not as successful when they're kind of working across channels. So I think that's been something interesting around this topic, is making sure that influencers are adaptable and they're, you know, making sure they're ahead of the curve when it comes to platform changes and actually what works on each. And then also thinking around, you know, how ads are actually working on TikTok, I think is really interesting. I read an article from Neuroscience which showed, you know, some really interesting research that really proved that their immersive feed layout for TikTok is performing extremely well. And actually, a study found that ads on TikTok were actually 23% better at kind of, when we're thinking around detail, memory, recall in ads, they were 23% more successful than TV ads. So I think this just shows the kind of way in which we're moving forward. I think 10 years ago, we would say that, you know, TV was probably the top channel for entertainment, and now that's kind of less and less as effective as it is on social. So I think something interesting to think around is we keep seeing year on year influencer spend and social spend going up, and a piece of the pie is getting smaller and smaller for above the line. And I think this will only continue to kind of move in that direction.
Yeah, I like even that last point about above the line. I see a lot of kind of a strategic move and more budget going towards sort of brands collaborating with influencers, because that's where sort of, you know, we spend most of our time. So I think that kind of makes sense, and I see a lot of brands will move into that space. And, you know, just speaking to sort of like 3 factors, you know, that are define, like staying on TikTok, that defining, you know, their impact on the landscape. And, you know, one is, you know, changing, you know, content production, and you spoke to it in terms of, you know, creators being in natural settings. Like I've seen so many bedrooms, bathrooms, people's houses. I've seen so many of that because people are just in their natural, you know, natural environments, authentically creating. And I feel like, you know, that's helped brands sort of reshape how they position their products and engage with their target audience as well. And then, you know, the impact on, you know, product discovery. You know, TikTok has surpassed Google as, you know, the most popular website on the internet. And, you know, we all have that thing where we go, you know, we find information first, or we go online, and it's through social media that we discover stuff, or we find stuff, or we hear things first. So I see that as a trend that will continue for TikTok. And then just, you know, TikTok's impact in changing, you know, other social platforms. And we've spoken, you know, about Instagram. You know, Instagram started off as an image sharing platform, and they're making that significant move to Reels, because they, you know, they want to be an entertainment platform. And you know, that is sort of where TikTok has put their flag in the ground and said, you know, we are about entertainment. And, you know, that kind of moves us into sort of our next focus, where, you know, we have the differentiators and the focus on entertainment, which I feel like TikTok have understood and use it as their USP.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure if everyone's seen the statement from TikTok that came out in June, but it's quite an interesting discussion point for today's session. I think, you know, the company recently released a statement which is pretty strong, saying that, you know, they're not a social network like Facebook, but actually they see themselves as an entertainment platform. And kind of when I look at that statement, you know, Facebook have built their algorithms based on interconnection of people, and that's really their core skill. And I think this goes back to that post that I mentioned earlier that's going, you know, doing its rounds on Instagram. Users see Facebook and Instagram as social first. Whereas for me, I see TikTok much more based on entertainment. You know, it brings out those cultural trends. It's a really unique experience that people have on TikTok. And also the biggest one is the fact that it doesn't really matter how connected you are, or in order for your content to have a chance to be successful on the platform or for it to go viral, it's very much about how entertaining that content is. And so I think you can kind of see Facebook panicking with Zuckerberg wanting to focus more on Reels and, you know, recommendations within the feed. But for me, going after TikTok's positioning is just not going to happen for Facebook unless they walk away from their social values, which they've built for years and years. I think there's a lot of conversation on the internet around this statement, and yes, TikTok probably is more of an entertainment platform, but actually when we think about the other capabilities they're building into the platform, such as shopping, does that become part of the entertainment package? Or like, I guess, what was your take here, Ed, on that?
I think TikTok are just, like I said, differentiating their positioning. They're strategically working towards, the fact that they're built on entertainment. Whereas, Instagram, as I said, started off as kind of image sharing and being social. And kind of when I think about sort of my usage, as I was telling you, my usage of both sort of platforms, I'd seek TikTok just to be entertained. As soon as I open it, I'm immersed, I'm lost. There's videos playing immediately, and I'm just like, being entertained, and I'm scrolling. Whereas, when I'm on Instagram, I'm doing a bit of both. I'm trying to, socialize and find out, what my cousin's up to, or what Kieran's doing after work. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm trying to connect with people as well. So I have more of a conversation on that platform. Whereas I feel like if Instagram sort of moves to that entertainment sort of space, then I'd have to utilize one. I don't think I need both, because right now they give me different things. So it's quite interesting that Instagram are making that move, but I feel TikTok have it right, and strategically everything they do plays into that. For example, they're TikTok have to make money like all platforms do, and with that they need creators to create content, and all their business model and their creative features to monetize is all built around strategically towards entertainment. And for example, like TikTok have created their creator fund, which pays creators who meet that minimum threshold and followership. Then they have the creator marketplace, where they can creators can collaborate with brands, and they've newly announced the Creator Next program, which expands on how creators can be compensated for the content they create. So I feel like generally everything they do kind of moves in the same direction internally, and speaks to why they're built on entertainment, and they back that up with the updates on the app, or how creators can monetize on the app as well.
I completely agree. I think it's interesting to see this shift, and I'm interested to see what happens with Instagram and how people take that as well.
Yeah, I think Mark Zuckerberg and crew, like they've got a hard task if they're trying to be TikTok, basically. So it will be interesting to see where they're taking, how successful this sort of Reels transition is.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think when it comes to influencer relationships with brands and the impact of social entertainment, I think it's clear to see that this is starting to really lead to conversion. And as you can see in the stat that we've pulled out here from the Drum, there were over 80 million social buyers in the US in 2020, which was actually 30% increase from 2019. And this is obviously set to rise again. I think when we think around like the successful campaigns we've had here at MG Empower, it's really building those long-term relationships with influencers and allowing them to have that creative freedom that provides that long-term value. So if an audience is provided consistent exposure to a brand through an influencer's content, then that brand is gradually going to gain that loyal customer base and that audience. And I think building that trust is crucial in generating sales. And especially with shopping through social channels becoming more and more normal, I think those, that return on investment for influencer marketing is really going to come to light. And building shoppability into content is something I think all brands and influencers should be thinking around.
For sure.
It's not just something that brands should be considering on their own pages. It should be built into contracts for influencers moving forward to make sure that we can really capitalize on that as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I feel like there's just that natural synergy between sort of that consumer spending behavior and that's influenced by content, sorry. And, that moment where you're entertained by a piece of content, can strike an instant or instinctive reaction to, that leads to eventually a purchase, or buying into a brand or believing into a brand. There's so much that happens, to a consumer from just watching content that, is maybe an ad, but we don't know it's an ad, and it's just, authentically placed. And I feel like, audiences need that connection. They desire to, to be part of that content or see themselves in that as well. because I feel like that's also a process within the entertainment. And there's a cool stat from Clue Track that talks about, 29% of consumers, are more likely to make a purchase on the same day with using social media. So that tells you the influence, that content itself has. And I would say one thing as well is, another stat they've got is 49% seek guidance from social media influencers before making a buying decision. And for me, that tells you that storytelling is key, in terms of how you sell your product, how you market your product, how you position it. There's no real secret, I would say. It's just about, how you storytell within that entertainment. And I feel like storytelling is, something that we do pretty well, in our strategies and campaigns here at MG. And I know you kind of have a few examples, a few elite examples, I would say, that that we have done in the past, for sure.
Yeah, I think when we were talking around this, we wanted to pull out a couple of examples that we've worked on here. And I think two examples that are quite different, but definitely play to that entertainment kind of era. And I think the first one for us, which was a massive standout recently, is the campaign we did with Lilo. So for those of you that don't know what Lilo is, so they're a leading luxury pleasure brand. So as you can imagine, this could have presented obstacles, often, it being a taboo subject on social media. So I think with this one, we needed to make sure that the narrative was right, but we also needed to make sure that we were working with the right influencers and, influencers that resonated with Lilo's brand message to empower women and show more sexual love to themselves confidently and proudly. And with this, we very much lent on video content, and in particular, it had a really strong comedy focus. I think something that you've mentioned already, Ed, is that creative control that influencers can have and having more of an open brief. And with this, it really worked because it meant that people could take those, more difficult conversations and topics and make it a bit more comedic. And I think as a result of us allowing that creative freedom, it resulted in, some incredible results. And one of the reels alone had over 17 million plays. Amazing. And we had 1.2 million engagements on that content. And the brand saw a huge spike on website traffic that day that the post went live. So I think this just comes back to the fact that, it was comedic content, but also something that Ed touched on earlier was around the fact that, it was shareable content, which meant that furthered the reach even more, which I think was a huge driver in that, massive reach number at the end of the day. And then thinking about one that's really quite different, but also stands out for different reasons, was some of our work with Bumble UK around International Women's Day back in March. And, this campaign was very much around the romance gap and the fact that Bumble's mission is really to make romance equal. And I think sometimes when we work on Bumble, it's very much around the platform and how we explain the features and things like this. But this time it was really around building that brand love, showcasing Bumble, and showcasing the fact that they want to make, romance equal on both parts. And I think this was a really great opportunity for us to work with a huge range of influencers. So it wasn't just around single influencers. We had single influencers, we had married influencers. We also had those that were speaking around topics on, the gender pay gap. We had people talking around gender equality. And it was really a great opportunity for us to see how people kind of think around the romance gap and how they would kind of bring that to life in a different interpretation. And all the content kind of had to start with the same start. It was, if romance was equal, then ... Yeah. And every single interpretation was different, which meant that it was incredibly engaging for audiences. We had incredible responses in commentary. We also used the Q&A feature within stories to get as much kind of feedback from audiences. And I think at the end of the day, this really just reinforced the brand's commitment to reshaping the kind of rules of dating and creating a safe online dating space for everyone.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. It's cool. I think that's two great examples that speak to why content, the type of content that we're doing is important, and speaks to why content is king.
Yeah, for sure. I think, in the end, when we're talking around this subject, I think entertainment and influencers, we're definitely just talking about content. The power of creating and attracting and engaging influencers, audiences, and for that reason, yes, I do think it is reshaping influencer marketing. And I think influencers must keep up with platforms and the kind of nuances within those platforms as well. And I think brands need to become more laser focused on discovering the audiences that they can impact in a way that's both meaningful and authentic, but also at the same time, taking that entertainment first approach and thinking around the influencers they can kind of leverage to gain that further trust, that reach, that authority by selecting the right type of talent as well. And I think here at MG Empower, when we're looking at kind of the sentiment on our influencer content at the end of a campaign, what we're really looking for is for, you know, the comments from audiences where they're saying like they didn't realize this was a piece of ad content. I think that is the absolute gold for us, is when we can kind of see that we're penetrating their feeds with entertaining content successfully.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of add to that. I would say, you know, entertainment is transforming the way, you know, we communicate messages, you know, and I would agree as well and say, you know, the social entertainment era is, you know, reshaping influencer marketing. There is that heavy focus for creators to be authentic in their approach, and I feel like, you know, that's sort of where that's almost an advantage for brands, you know, if they can meet, you know, creators at that point, you know, the synergy can be great, and I feel like you know, it's just a thing that's going to keep evolving. But you know, as well as creators are being free and liberal to entertain, I feel like, you know, brands need to come with that same energy, you know, in order to, you know, position and place their products in different ways.
Yeah, and I also think there's a new moment on social platforms that has kind of opened for micro influencers once again. They're, you know, they're an extremely effective way of bringing great brand results, and you know, according to Forbes, their engagement rates are 200% higher than mid and macro influencers. And I think this just further emphasizes the fact that video first platforms like TikTok are really prioritizing the quality of content over the following size, which is an interesting thing for us to kind of keep tabs on.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I know a lot has been said. We've kind of said a lot and spoken about a lot and dived into sort of different kind of perspectives. But in terms of like key takeaways, you know, just thinking from sort of a brand's perspective and how they rethink their influencer marketing strategies, you know, and there's just a few considerations that we'd say and learnings that would say a brand should take on board. And one would be, you know, rethinking how you market your product, and that's what I was speaking to in terms of, you know, entertainment has changed the way we communicate messages. You know, before it was a very singular and closed-minded, a strict regime in terms of how you're briefed, and there's an expectation of what, you know, brands expect to see, you know, once you're briefed. So I feel like, you know, there needs to be an open-mindedness and rethinking to allow room for collaboration in order, you know, for your product to feature in content authentically and resonate, you know, to the audiences you're trying to reach.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another one that I kind of touched on at the beginning when I was talking around the fact that vanity metrics were very much what we were kind of looking at, you know, at the beginning of the kind of era. But brands should also be thinking about new KPIs to see if their content really is entertaining audiences. And, you know, more and more metrics have become available over the years. And it really enables us to see if a piece of content is actually performing well. I think brands need to shift the vanity metrics to become perhaps secondary KPIs. And of course, reach and impressions are still good metrics. We always want to know how many eyeballs we've had on a piece of content, but we should also be looking at metrics that are more meaningful, more granular, such as view-through rate, click-through rate, engagement rate, cost per engagement. Also looking at sentiment and kind of seeing that level of activity within comments, influencers are kind of receiving on their content, but also metrics like saves and shares are often one that I like to have a look at, and I think are often overlooked because they're the ones that are indicating the intent to purchase as well. And I think, you know, going back to TikTok, because we've spoken a lot about it in this session, I think when we're looking at the success of TikTok content, we're very much looking at metrics like view-through rate. So if you think back to the fact that the average attention span is now only 5 seconds, reach is no longer as valuable if you know, that person's only watching it for a couple of seconds. We need to understand how much of, say, a 30-second video is actually being watched, and when is the brand actually mentioned within that video clip, because if the audience is switched off before that timestamp, how effective is it actually? So I think at the end of the day, every campaign, you know, at the end of every campaign, brands should really be looking at the performance and benchmarking the success of the next campaign off the back of that as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. You said something quite interesting. I feel like that speaks to me in terms of like, if we looked at how many saves, because I know I save like tons of things, so that would be such an interesting sort of metric to include as well. But just on a sort of last point in terms of learnings, one that kind of resonates with me in terms of the work I do is that creative freedom, you know, is for me, I feel like is a secret for, you know, brands that are willing to partner with influencers and take advantage of, you know, of the authentic content that they can develop. Like, I feel like, you know, brands need to, take the chains off a bit, because, you're playing, like when we're talking about influencer marketing, you're playing in a space where, the creator is God, and is the person that's speaking to the audiences that you're trying to reach. So I feel like there just needs to be a level of creative freedom and freedom for the creator to visualize how your brand can connect, even though you have your essential messaging, your creative positioning, like working in collaboration, but allowing some ownership for the creator to take your brand to where you need it to be, so that it connects, to its audience and translates in real life, so that I can see how this product is useful, or I can visualize myself in this content and see that hey, that could be something that I want, or I'm just entertained, so I have recollection or recall of that brand. So kind of just that's how I would say that would be the last thing, is that creative freedom, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone joining us today. I think before we wrap up, we just wanted to leave a couple of minutes to answer some questions from the audience. So our team's kindly gone through and selected a couple for us to chat through quickly now. So yeah, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I'll just read one. So how can brands ensure they are one step ahead in the new age of social entertainment? It's a good question.
I think it's just about always following the kind of the trends, but also looking at what are the updates on platforms. Are there new platforms that you should be jumping on the back of? I think brands are often too scared to trial new content formats or to trial new platforms and actually get left behind. I think those that are a bit more daring often have more success. I think when you think back to when Reels first started on Instagram, a lot of people were a bit skeptical, so they didn't try it out, but actually Instagram was favoring Reels content, and you were seeing huge impressions on that content versus grid content or IGTV content at the time. So I think it's about being a little bit daring and a bit of a trial and test at the same time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that sort of last point. Is definitely a test and learn sort of situation, I would say, especially in house. There needs to be sort of like focus groups where, like you said, you've got a team that knows what the updates are, that are checking the trends, but you're also in the thick of it. You're testing and you're learning to see what's working, what's resonating, what isn't as well. And I feel like brands need to not look to things as failure if it doesn't sort of resonate. It's opportunity to learn. It's opportunity to pivot to a different direction. And I feel that comes with, as I mentioned last as well, having that creative freedom, to be free, to be authentic. So I feel like, whilst we're amongst this social entertainment era, it requires a level of bravery, freedom as well, to test and learn. So I'd say that would be sort of my advice on that. But yeah, I think we are out of time. It's been a great conversation. And it's been, great to have you guys join us as well. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure to host today with Steff. Feel free to reach out to us with any further questions, engage with our socials and keep an eye out for, information on the next episode, of our Power Up series as well. But hope you have a good afternoon and thanks for joining again.
Thank you everyone for joining.